Thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing this. Kick us off with your, kind of how the world looks from your desk at the moment. A tour d'horizon.
Wow. I like an open question to start a conversation. I'll start with the big picture because Mike talked about and yourself, geopolitical situation first. We have our own business opportunities and issues to deal with, but if you look around the world, I think certainly for luxury companies post-COVID, where there was this incredible boom in demand, we've now normalized, but also entered this period that some describe as the reversal of globalization, which sounds very highbrow. But what's actually happening is a rapid fragmentation of markets in a way that I and our business has never seen before. And that manifests itself in ways such as technology barriers. So in China, ADAS systems, as an example, they have different requirements to America and Europe, partly for security and partly for political reasons. Same with emission standards. So there's a whole plethora of new challenges and a fragmentation of what used to be a fairly consistent approach across the world, set on high standards, and that makes life difficult. I think at the next level, we've also got major OEMs and suppliers have invested massively in electrification over the past 5 to 10 years. Then the volumes haven't come. So we've now seen stress in the supply chain and in some of the OEMs' profit and loss accounts because of not meeting the volumes that were written down, despite having invested billions cash out to create the capacities for those new technologies. So those are the things that we see on a macro level, and locally, as a small player, we can't imagine having electric vehicles and engine vehicles in parallel and coping with 3 radically different regimes around the world.
So that then brings us to policy. I mean, tell us about the kind of policy environment, what you're looking at, what changes you see down the road, what you're concerned about.
Yeah. So there's 3 areas that we're really thinking about. One is regulation itself. And I touched on emissions regulation and cybersecurity and the electronic aspects. The divergence in those regulations is highly costly to any manufacturer, is particularly costly to small manufacturers. So that's one area that's a real issue. The second is tariffs. Mike's already mentioned it. There's always been tariffs, but the rate of change at the moment and the effect that it can have on demand and profitability in particular.
And the uncertainty, presumably, as well.
Exactly. But as always, we are optimists. There's always opportunity because at least now we're less worse off than some of our European competitors. So it's 4 times the tariff.
Is that the best people can hope for?
Well,
we're less worse off.
We're British. Yeah.
We're British.
So, absolutely.
Yeah. Stiff upper lip.
So we're less worse off than some of our European and non-European competitors. So we have a small relative advantage there. And I guess the last thing is the consistency of local policy. If you look at the last 6 years, say, we've gone from a banning of engines in 2030 to 2035 to 30, allowing hybrids, ZEV mandate change, allowances for small vehicle manufacturers, which we really appreciate because we have a slight lag to the volume players. And this movement, when you think these changes can happen in a year or 2 years, and our product cycle, our product development is 5. So we can't be that flexible. Yeah. These are the big challenges.
And now you've got the industrial strategy, which we're going to hear quite a lot more of later. I mean, there's a business of, it's quite interesting just chatting to people before we started. There's some warmth, actually, for it and for the government over it, and the kind of sense of government and industry working together. But that, presumably for you, that's the crucial thing, that this is not just something that comes from government.
Yes. So I have to say that the dialogue and the openness has been fantastic so far. It's a shame that Jonathan Reynolds isn't here because he's been a real support for us. Not always giving what we need, but always open to listen to what we need and explain why it can or can't be achieved. Very accessible, very up to date and on point with the facts and the figures. So working together is key, there's no question. And there's plenty of examples where that's happening. And on the industrial strategy, we wait to see the details. We recognize the fact that there is funding allocated to automotive in particular, to EV development, to charging networks, and to helping us through the transition from combustion to electrified mobility. The detail will follow up in the coming months.
And when it comes to the trade deals, you mentioned a bit about tariffs and the uncertainty and all the rest of it. And obviously the US one, well, is it done? Let's talk first about the US and then talk maybe a little bit more about other prospective ones. Is the US, it's not clear to me whether it is 100% done. Is it 100% done?
Yes.
Right.
That's shocked you, hasn't it? Straight answer for radio.
We never get that. Never get that.
So shall I elaborate?
Okay, so it is done, and done in a way that cannot be gone back on. And we're going to talk later on about Donald Trump and about geopolitics and all the rest of it. And I'm not going to invite you into that area, but you are certain that the arrangements that you expect are now set in stone.
As solid as can be. So you just never know. I think the one thing you have to get used to nowadays, if you study complexity and dynamism from Porter's theory of market competition 30 years ago, that it wasn't complex and it wasn't dynamic. It is now complex and dynamic. Yeah. So is it done? Anything can happen. But the deal was done in early May, or at least the agreement directionally was made. It requires presidential decree, or whatever they call that document. Yeah. That happened on Monday. It was delayed because of the G7 disruption, etc., but it's now in place. Right. To give you an indication of what that means to a company like us, we were fortunate in that we predicted it could happen, so planned not to ship cars during the period between April and June. It was a conscious decision. To put that in context, imagine losing a third of your salary for 3 months. Not catastrophic, but slightly uncomfortable. Thankfully, it is enacted as of Monday, but it takes 7 days to get into the statute. Right. So it comes live on the 30th of June, last day of the month, last day of the quarter. So we're planning to invoice 3 months worth of sales in a 24-hour period. That's complexity and dynamism, right there.
Yeah, and for your customers.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, just a word for the US customers, because it's been a rough ride for them as well.
It has, but thankfully we had some stock left. We now have none.
Actually, that's interesting. Yeah. So what are your stock levels in the US compared with normal?
Half of ideal stock. So we were lucky that we put a few more in the first quarter in anticipation of this, let's call it fasting period, which worked. The demand has been strong, and we'll be in a good shape when we start to invoice cars like fury on Monday of next week.
Yeah. And India, I mean, other trade deals and other places, to talk a bit about that?
So India is really interesting. I think if you look at the Indian market, it's got the biggest human population now on Earth. The luxury and the premium car market has been quite stagnant over the past 15 years until the last 5, and it's really taken off. So there is massive growth. There's a lot of wealth there, but there's been a very suppressed premium and luxury car market for various factors. That's now accelerating. To give an indication, the import duty on luxury cars is 90% today. So a reduction of that for UK-based manufacturers is really quite significant. It would put all the luxury British brands in a position where we're almost in the normal price category of a high-spec premium car. Whether we go that low, we'll see, but it could be potential. It won't be 20% more business for most of us because of the size of the Indian market, but it's very interesting. So we really appreciate what's been done to secure that.
Interesting. And we should talk a bit about Europe as well. I mean, there has been a kind of rolling reset, isn't there, really, with Europe? Tell us a bit about that.
So the European reset for the automotive industry has not been as much of a step change as the original deal linked with Brexit. So the great thing about that deal was it protected most of the benefits that we had from being in the European Union. The downside was customs processing and some of the speed of logistics and transport, which doesn't sound much, but for most companies, it was millions of extra cost and dozens of people just to cope with the import-export, because most of us in the UK will buy a high percentage of the components that we don't make in the UK. Most of them will come from Europe. Yeah. So there's tariffs and processes on the way in, and there's tariffs and processes on the cars going out. So the reset was a minor improvement, but the big step was the first Brexit deal.
Right, okay. But we should talk a little bit about electric vehicles as well. So we've got the ZEV mandate in place, clarity now on the final date, which is 2035, isn't it? So what is going on there? Do you have the kind of clarity that you think we all need, everyone here needs, on where we are, where the government is with EVs?
Today, yes. It comes back to the question, could it change? I would reiterate, we really hope it doesn't, and we give that feedback regularly. As long as we know what's happening, we can plan, because it takes 5 years to develop a car. And if you change 2 years down the line, it's impossible to go back. So stability in that is important. But if we take the outlook, some countries are banning in 2030, others 35, others 2040 around the world. Right. And some countries, no ban yet stated. We are one of 4 luxury makers in the UK. I'll advertise them all: McLaren, Bentley, Rolls, and Aston Martin. And I think we are the most iconic. I forgot you asked that question.
No, but you waited a little bit before you went there, and that's good.
It's all about delivery. Between the 4 of us, there's only 6 luxury car companies on Earth. I'll advertise the other 2, Lamborghini and Ferrari being the others. So we are the world champions in luxury car production. And if we export 90% of our sales, production, and the UK is the first to switch off engines, then we have to make a decision. Do we go fully electric and risk the 90%, or withdraw from the UK market and give up the 10%, or try and hang on to both and bear the cost of that for as long as possible? Yeah. Now, back to listening, the government, both the previous and current, have been fantastic at looking at the differences between small vehicle manufacturers, small but high value, and the higher volume manufacturers. So we have certain flexibilities that gives us a transition period, and we fully appreciate that. So it's not a cliff edge for us. But over that window, over that time window, we face major challenges to know when to launch which technologies and to have a market that's ready for them. So we believe in electrification. Our customers not yet at the same level of adoption as some of the volume.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. I mean, do you see that changing? And if so, what is it that drives potentially the change for your customers, for your very august group of customers?
I honestly think it's a combination of a generational thing. So when the next generation of younger, wealthier people come through, they'll have different perspectives. But it's also making electric exciting and inspirational. I mean, no one buys a luxury car because they need to get from A to B. It's for all kinds of other reasons. A lot of it is to buy the best in the world of its type, because somebody's thought of it and created it, and they love that endeavor and achievement. And it's a bit of indulgence, but that's what luxury is. And so we've got to make electric cars that are more exciting, more colorful, more powerful, more crafted, more dynamic, and more inspirational.
But where does the excitement come from? Because I can remember going back, I think it probably was probably a decade ago, when we were first discussing all these things. So someone asking the question, where young people, including young wealthy people, just aren't interested in cars anymore as they used to be. And there's this business of kind of, are you seeing a change in what it is about a car that attracts someone, and particularly your kind of iconic brands?
I think there's 2 things I would say to counter the thought that young people aren't interested. Formula One. And
that question was before the Formula One film and the whole thing.
And go to universities to talk like this in front of students at LBS, UCL, or elsewhere, and ask who isn't interested in cars. And at the end, having talked about the industry, what it's going through, and how it might look in the future, who's still not interested. And you usually get about 98% conversion when they understand the technology, the innovation, the sheer effort that goes in to creating something that potters around the streets at various speeds and emissions. I think when people understand the industry and how it's evolving radically, actually, not revolving, young people like the challenge and the pioneering spirit.
Yeah, okay. Just a final thought then of, looking looking a bit ahead, 5 years ahead. I mean, you talked about some of the challenges. You talked about a very new kind of global environment that there is. Do you, when you look ahead now, can you just not plan because what the heck is going to happen? Or, I mean, do you have to anyway and be more flexible? How does it affect you as a business?
I think there's two things. We're in a fairly scientific place, aren't we? Everything tries to balance out, doesn't it? So if you've got a hot object and a cold one and they're close together, they kind of share the heat and level each other out. So all this chaos that we're going through, the will is for it to all level out, to stabilize, to be prosperous, to be investing, earning, and getting back to some kind of regular business cadence. All the other stuff is from critical to minor noise. Yes. And if you follow every signal of everything that's going on and chase it, you go crazy. So you have to stand back far enough to not be disconnected, absorb it, and stay as flexible as possible and have a way of getting through it in a way that you think can work. And that's the key to successful failure. And for us, just one example, on the basis that we don't know the rate of adoption of electric vehicles in the luxury sector or how to really make them exciting in 10 years' time, we will develop technologies that are totally flexible, and we're on the verge of this, that a few years ago we wouldn't have had to think about. Now we do, and I won't give the secrets away, but you can do it through technology, you can do it through your business model. In times of rapid change and dynamism, you have to stay aware, be good at making judgments and hypotheses, and acting upon them, and then managing risk on a day-to-day basis. It's the big difference between 5 to 10 years ago and today. In the good old days, you looked at the market, you looked at the competitors, you looked at the economy, you wrote a plan, and it kind of happened. And you thought it was changing a lot, but it wasn't. Now, you write it, throw it away, and just wait for it to come on. And first is think about what risks are coming, and then prioritize them, and even before they come, fix them just in case they do. And that risk assessment, mitigation, and everyday crisis management in a constructive way is the way to be more flexible. So that's, I think, in complex times, that's all you can achieve.
Adrian, thank you so much. Huge round of applause, please, for Adrian. Brilliant. Thank you.